Hey friends, today I'm going to tell you the story of a Utah teenager in Spanish Fork who took historic preservation into his own hands.
So be true to your school now, just like you would to your girl or guy. Be true to your school.
First, we've got to go way back. Too far back, probably. High school hasn't always been a thing in the United States. Education has been. Public education has been around for a long time. But high school was primarily reserved for rich kids going to college soon. So going to school past 13 or 14 years old was almost unheard of until about the late 1800s, early 1900s. The early 1900s is when high schools really started to take off. But even then, it wasn't until the middle of the century that going to high school was a regular, common thing that pretty much everyone did. And when it took off, it took off. And you had things like school spirit. Now, school spirit is a little bit harder to put a history to. I did some research and I found a lot of individual schools mentioning their own traditions and their own histories of like spirit weeks and homecoming traditions and things of that nature. But just as a general phenomenon, no one's really dove into the history of school spirit and how it came to be and why it exists. So in most schools, you do have a spirit week in which you have days where you wear a certain themed clothing or do something silly. And then you have an assembly with the whole school where you sing and dance and do fun games and things like that. All for the purpose of getting people super pumped about school, I guess. Anyway, don't let middle-aged me spoil the fun for you. If you have school spirit, good for you. The almost cult-like way that we wear certain colors and follow certain mascots and do certain cheers and identify ourselves by the school that we go to actually appears to have some good positive benefit. Kids who feel connected to their school and to its traditions and its history are more likely to stay in school and complete their education. They feel more a part of the community and they feel less depressed, and that all of those things are objectively good things, I would say. But in my mind, this might be a stereotype, nothing compares to the school spirit of the 1960s and 70s. You were in your dad's car, your best girl by your side, your Letterman jacket on, no seatbelts, no problems. You went down to the drive-in, and it was no problem until this gang from the rival school showed up and wanted to cause some trouble. Anyway, all of that aside, that's just to say that high school is relatively new in human history and even education history. School spirit is something that some serious historian needs to sit down and focus on. I think that would be a great project for some academic person somewhere. But it was in the midst of all this hubbub about high school and school spirit that Spanish Fork High School came into existence. Spanish Fork itself was first explored in 1776 by Spanish friars Escalante and Dominguez, but if you look at it on signs, it's Dominguez Escalante. Two people, two different names. And they were just exploring, looking for a new route to get to the Spanish missions in California. And Spanish Fork was settled by Mormon pioneers in 1851, and its first high school opened in the 1910s. I think 1916. I can't prove it. I would have to do some more research that I don't think I can do from home, but I'm going to say 1916. I'm willing to be wrong. It's 1910 something. And that one stood for a long time. They built a gym in 1935, which is now on the National Register of Historic Places. The high school building itself is demolished, and it was replaced in 1964 by a new high school, the high school in question during this story. So when Spanish Fork needed a mascot for their high school, they naturally became the Dons, which is a formal way of saying like Mr. or Sir in Spanish. And all of that history culminates with this story in 1976. In 1976, the graduating class of Spanish Fork High School donated a mural, a tile mural, a mosaic, if you will, to the school itself. It's a large thing. It's like 10 feet high, probably. It's, several feet wide, and it depicts a dashing Spanish man on a horseback. And it's just a couple of colors. It has a border, it has a background, and then it has the guy on the horse. So 3 colors. This mural had around 1,000 individual tiles, and it hung on the wall of Spanish Fork High School for so long that some of those graduates' grandchildren walked by that same mural on their way to classes. And it was in 2024 that construction was nearing completion on yet another new Spanish Fork High School. The old one had run its course. It had been around since the 1960s. By the end of the school year in 2024, that high school was completed, and the older high school was scheduled to be demolished over the summer. And with the scheduled demolition of the school, our hero Logan Von Hoene arrived on the scene. He learned that this mural from 1976, which his grandmother helped create, was going to be destroyed with the school. It was not scheduled to be saved. So out with the old, in with the new. That's the saying that we have, but not while Logan is around. With permission from school administrators, Logan made his senior project, saving that mosaic. There was one small problem, though. Logan was given 1 month to move the mural out of that building. And this was a big project. Now, I've moved a couple of log cabins in my time, and to do that, you basically label each individual log and track where it is and where it goes after you move it, so that it goes up exactly the same way. And that's maybe 50 pieces, including floorboards and roof boards. So with 1,000 pieces, Logan had to be very detailed about how the tiles came off, in what order they came off, and how they kept track of tiles. And he had to communicate with that with all of his volunteers. He had to coordinate that. And trying to save every single tile was also a big deal, trying to get them off the wall without damaging the tiles, so he could just reuse them when he rebuilt the mural. So there was a reasonable concern among his family and friends that they wouldn't be able to meet that deadline, and all of this work and all of this planning would end up being for nothing, because they weren't going to reschedule tearing the building down. It was coming down when it was coming down, with or without the mural inside. But somehow, keeping track of the tiles, not rushing, not breaking, I don't know if they broke any. They probably didn't break very many. But they ended up getting the mural out just in time. They put everything into totes and organized it, and that's when the real work began. So each tile removed from the wall had to be individually cleaned and prepped to go on the new wall. And the mural was basically a giant 1,000-piece puzzle. Some bigger chunks of the same color probably didn't have to be, the exact same tile next to the exact same tile. But when you get into the details, that's where you have to have the right tiles in the right place, and everything has to come together. You can't have something out of place. You can't have something missing, or it's going to be very obvious. But to Logan, this project wasn't just about saving a piece of art. It was about saving memories and preserving the history of a place. When you tear down a building, especially a school, you tear down all the memories of that place. You've heard the phrase, if walls could talk. Well, if walls of a high school could talk, they would talk about first kisses. They would talk about high school sweethearts. They would talk about happiness and sadness. A lot of great growing times in the hallways of a high school So just before the end of 2024, Logan Von Hoene was able to complete the mural. He got it hung in the new school, and he got it all cleaned up, and over winter break, it was ready to go. And it will hang proudly in the new school for years to come. Maybe Logan's grandchildren one day will walk through that high school and say, my grandfather helped save this mural, and his grandmother before him helped make this mural. Maybe generations of people will walk by this mural that was saved in Spanish Fork High School. So why did this story resonate with me? Well, part of it is I did a whole video about how 2024 super sucked for Utah history. But this happened in 2024 and did not super suck. So I wanted to definitely highlight that. But also, Logan wasn't just disappointed about a mural. He did something about it. He went to the people in charge and said, we need to save this mural. What can I do? And that's what we all need to be doing. By the time we hear about a demolition permit coming out on a historic building, the time to be upset about it is long past. We need to be concerned about our historic resources right now. We need to be talking to our political leaders. We need to be talking to community leaders. We need to be talking to owners of historic properties, because right now is the time to save those things, not when it's crumbling and the city has decided to tear it down. By that point, the decision is made. The talking is done. The time to be upset about it is way past. So here's a great example of what happens when you have some foresight and you plan ahead and you do something. So I will see you next time on the next video on historic with Carl. That's me. I'm Carl. Bye.